Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Seeds of Elegance. I'm your host, Libby, and I lead a process called creative embodiment, a mix of creativity, embodiment, channeled towards systems innovation. The larger aims here are to create and look for alternative models to health, wealth, and well being in their total and complete interconnection. And specifically on this show, I bring together mischief makers, people who are challenging the rules of the game and how things are done. And I'm so excited today to introduce Dr. Rikki. She is a sex, relationship, intimacy, and spiritual life coach. She's also an internal medicine doctor with a specialization in women's health, and at the moment is doing some clinical work, but focusing on her coaching and bringing medical information around sexual health to the general public. And today we're going to get to learn about her story and what lights her up inside. Dr. Rikki, I'm so happy to have you here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here. So
Yeah.
wonderful. I feel so honored and excited
Mm.
to share.
And I just want to name, because one of the key themes that guides me in the work that I do and that I offer to people when I do creative embodiment is the concept of emergence, that you kind of have to take that first step for the next things to roll. And in December, when I had created my first interview here, I posted it and I didn't have a huge plan. I'm doing this more informally. You have to just like be confident in taking that first step. And the day after, I got a message from you, like, had never spoken to you. And I just get this like life story of all the themes that I'm working with here and wanting to work with, this like wrestling with science and spirituality and sexuality and women's health. And it was just like I was sitting in this room and I was just like, okay, I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing right now.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Uh, you're
So
doing
it's
beautiful work, also bringing this to the public. So thank you.
thank you. So it is February. It's a little bit over a month from when you originally sent me that message, but I would love to allow you to speak. You were open with me. And one thing that's interesting as a relationship coach is like people bringing their openness to you is something that happens. But there's always a little bit like whenever someone like gives me their whole story off the bat, or, as much can fit in a Facebook message, I'm like, whew, okay, receiving that. And I knew you have already been through so much to be at a place where you would be open and willing to share that much.
Yes.
So I want to just allow you to open the portal to who you are and what you do in the world. And then we'll dive into how you got there.
Yeah. So, as you introduced, I am a sex, love, intimacy, and spiritual life coach. And I'm also a physician. I always think it's very interesting because what got me here um, was a deep unknowing of myself turned into a deep knowing of myself. And so the reason I say that, and the reason that I reached out to you, like just basically vomiting my, like purging my whole life story, is because I didn't know life could be so good. And by being so good, I don't mean that it's always easy, because I feel like the full range of emotions now, but I had lived my past life so according to how society told me to live, and so afraid to know myself, and in such deep rejection of myself.
Mm.
And when I finally woke up and started to get to know myself and become so intimate with myself, I discovered that that's where the bliss, that's where the ease, that's where the joy comes in life. And that in rejecting myself, I was basically like slowly killing myself. And so, you know, because I was so afraid to know myself, I built my life according to how society told me to. So at the age of 37, I had everything. I had like a beautiful house in the perfect neighborhood, two beautiful children who I adore and have much more intimate relationship with now that I know myself. And the job as a physician, which I always knew that I wanted to be a healer and be of service in this world. And that felt like, per society's guidelines, the best way to do it. And I was married, but completely living like a separate life from my ex-husband. We had no emotional or physical intimacy.
Mm,
And I found myself feeling empty and all alone
mm,
and completely miserable. And I couldn't understand it. And
mm,
then I had this breast cancer scare. And I went in to have the mass removed. I had a surgery. And I always say, when I was under anesthesia, angels must have come in. So here I was, this unaware, completely in denial, afraid to feel anything, scientist living life on the surface with
mm,
no intimacy in my life, not with my children. I was mom, I was always around, but I was always exhausted, never
mm,
fully present, not with my husband at the time, not with any of my friends. It was all like very superficial, not
mm,
with my family. And so I ended up feeling totally empty inside. And when I went in for this surgery, the message came through that said, clear it all, because you got to find yourself and you
mm,
need the space to do it. And so here I was, this scientist, completely living life on the surface, who suddenly became deeply intuitive
mm,
and started down this path of, well, I'm going to listen to this guidance.
mm.
So I left my marriage and I left my job. And I was always known as this type A people pleaser, rules follower, who suddenly was like, I have no idea what's coming in front of me. And I don't need to know, because I'm having this guidance come through. And I went on this mission to develop the best love story of my life with myself and to truly know myself. And in that, I cracked open a world of magic and deep love, deep intimacy, both with myself and with others, and massive layers of healing that, I'm still doing, but I've found incredible ways to heal through play and pleasure, especially in the work that I'm doing, around sex coaching and all of that, because I believe that sex and intentional self-pleasure can be used for deep healing. And in that, there can be such revelation, such growth, such expansion. And it's a really playful and fun way to heal. So it doesn't always have to be so like heavy and dark. And I mean, you can have the heaviness and the darkness in the pleasure, right? And you can have the pain with the pleasure.
Ooh,
So yeah, that's just a little bit about what got me here.
thank you for that intro. And there's so many places that we could begin to pull from. But the first thing I want to ask, just hearing even a little bit more now than I knew from what you shared, what did the like intuition is definitely something that we wrestle with here and talk about here. I also want to name at the time when I was making this, before I had done any interviews, I made this video and again, I was in this room and I went back and forth being like, can I use spirituality and science in the same sentence? Like just so afraid that to claim the word science, like I'll just be polluting it by like that. I would like and I'm someone who grew up deeply religious. So I never had that like scientific policing. I always had like the more religious policing, but then evolving out of the like the level to which the religious doctrine governed my life, science became a place that felt liberating for me, felt safer, felt concrete. And I didn't lose my spiritual side, but it was like, thank God there's like literal things in the world that I can point to and talk to. And we have shared language. So then when I discovered the community that we're a part of now, which is really embracing these tantric and Taoist, ancient Chinese, ancient Indian medicine techniques and merging them with modern trauma research, in that space, I'm like, wow, there's like people who are living both of these paths. But outside of that context, I felt scared. Like, can I claim that word? I'm a trained designer. I'm an artist. I'm everything always like everything in the gray, right? Everything in movement, which I can intuitively know, but like fear the language, fear the words. So I just wonder how, like, were you raised in a more scientific home? And then also when you say this identity as a scientist, like, and now you're in this breast cancer surgery or removal, and you hear this intuitive voice, like what is that? What was the sensation at that time? What were you thinking? What were you feeling that you actually began to listen to it and let it guide you?
Yeah, very interesting. So I'm Jewish and I'm Reformed Jew, and religion was not big in my family. Like I went to Jewish day school, but it always felt more of a culture than a religion. So like spirituality was not big and all of that. Now I grew up in Texas. And so when I was 15, I met a man who was my first boyfriend, who was very, very religious, Presbyterian. And he, it was very important to him. So I'd go to church with him and I would read the Bible with him and learn a little bit about it. And he was really, really strong on prayer. And so I started to read more books about prayer and all this, read about people's experiences and so prayer and that kind of thing became a little bit more potent in my life because I noticed that there was like a power to
Mm.
the connection.
Mhm.
Um, but I kind of was not really that connected to it. And the more that I look back at my life, I realized that yes, I was raised in a much more scientific type home where spirituality was not spoken about. My mother was a microbiologist, her father a pharmacist, my grandfather on my dad's side a humanistic Jew, meaning that he didn't even believe in God. So there was a lot of it was all science from my grandfather on my dad's side. So there was a lot of science, absolutely. When I was 2.5 years old, I went to my parents and I said, all I want for my third birthday, all I want is a baby doll that walks and talks. And you'll never believe what happened. On my third birthday, my mom is on her way with cupcakes to my birthday at school, and she's 8.5 months pregnant with my brother. And 2 weeks early, he's born on my birthday.
Ooh, he heard the prayer.
Yes. So the more that I look back on my life, I see how much I had that kind of within me already, but I had shut it down because I wasn't in an environment where it was really fostered.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So the next part of the question was, what was the intuitive hit like when that came through? So this is interesting. I had been so miserable in my life when I went in for this breast mass removal. I was numbing out on antidepressants. I was trying to figure out ways to survive. I was literally looking outside of me constantly for external validation in ways that were always by following the rules. So let me volunteer as, giving medical information to the schools in the community. Let me always bring people into my home and give them free medical exams. Let me constantly do more for the clinic that I'm working for. And so everybody outside of me could tell me how great I was because I had such a terrible internal voice that was so loud and in such, again, deep rejection of myself. So right before I went in for this surgery, literally the hour before I left for the hospital, I jumped on LinkedIn because I was like, this can't be my life.
Mm.
It just came to me like I was like, I finally admitted that I was miserable. I said, this can't be my life.
Mm.
And so I jumped on LinkedIn and I see this post and they're looking for, it's a startup and they're looking for a CEO of the company.
Mm.
It's all about women's health and empowering women. And I was like, oh, this is kind of perfect for me. And I know I'm meant to do something bigger. I can't just be in a clinic speaking one-on-one with patients. Like I love that, but I need to do something bigger with bigger impact.
Yep.
That just came through. And so I submitted my resume and I was like, well, I've never like been CEO of a company. I've never even I've really done anything outside of medicine, but in a clinic, but whatever, I'll just submit it. And of course they end up right after they end up interviewing me and all this stuff. So that was kind of the initial thing that happened. I ended up not taking the job because then the next thing that happened was I 6 months earlier, I had asked my ex-husband to go to therapy with me, and he told me that that was he had a lot of his own internal stuff around therapy and bad experiences with it in the past. And so, not I don't think he was trying to shut me down, but he looked at me and he goes, "Well, that's a you problem, and if you want to go to therapy, you
Mm,
can go to therapy."
mm,
So I, got on a stronger dose of antidepressants, brushed everything under the rug, tried to smile and make it all okay. But now when I came out of surgery, and again, this time the intuition was really strong. It almost was like a message saying, you have this mass as a warning that you're not living a life in alignment. And so you can remove the mass, and you have two choices now. You can make a change and start living for you and start knowing yourself, or you can continue to be a shell of yourself and you're going to die. Whether you're like physically here on earth, you'll actually be a shell of yourself. So
mm,
I chose to go this other way. So I went to my ex-husband. I said, I set up a therapy appointment for us on
mm,
Monday. This was a week after my surgery.
mm,
It's at 5 p.m. I set up a nanny for the kids. There's nothing on a Monday at 5 that can't wait for Tuesday morning at work. Monday at 5 p.m. rolls around. I show up to therapy and he doesn't come.
mm,
And so instead of being like, I mean, at that point, it felt again like another message for me. This
mm,
is your out. This is your way to move forward. This relationship is out of alignment and you've gotten all that you need from it. You have these two beautiful children. Let's move on. So I went to him and said, I want a divorce.
mm,
At which point he was like, wait, I didn't know that was an option. But it was such a deep knowing again that like I'm meant to do something greater and different with my life, and I'm not meant to be in this marriage, and I need to create space. And so I left both of them, and that was kind of, it was with such certainty. I remember people saying to me, you're going to regret this. With my work,
mm,
my ex-husband, they were all like, you're going to regret this, you're going to regret this. And I kept saying, I'm actually not going to regret this. And the truth is, I've never regretted it. I've always felt grateful for all of it, for the experience that I went through, for the parting of what no longer served me. And yeah, that as I started to connect deeper and deeper to my intuition, I recognized how much I had lived my life in from a place of control.
mm,
So I'm going to control the outcomes.
mm,
And as I connected deeper to my intuition, I decided to live my life from a place of surrender.
mm,
And I didn't want to be the one, I wanted to be the one to listen and make decisions from there. And so I was deeply drawn to nature, and I would go out and I still say this, but not quite as often as I did when I couldn't see the path in front of me. I'd say, God, source, universe, whatever I felt like using that day. Allow all that is aligned with my highest good to flow in with ease, and make
mm,
it so abundantly clear that there's only one choice, and
mm,
allow all that does not serve me to shed away.
mm.
And so now it just helps me connect deeper to my intuition. And there'll be times where I'm kind of confused and I don't really know what's happening, but there's a reminder that there's time and actually no decisions need to be made just yet, right? Because it'll be so clear when
Yeah.
when there's that knowing. Yeah.
Ooh, what was I want to get to like move into the place after, but I want to ask about this because I'm a creative person. So I really love both art and science to offer imagery at times for things in the mental, emotional, spiritual, since the mental, emotional, spiritual are invisible. They end up manifesting outward in physical things, but they are invisible off the bat to my knowing. So when you think about this break that you went through, did it feel, because sometimes I compare to the people I work with, I'll give a couple different analogies for pain. Sometimes I give the analogy of birth because there's so much pressure. Something's built, a change is coming. There's so much change building, and there's actually something new that needs to come out. And so we need to like receive the information of the pressure as something new is coming and to make the choice. Sometimes change can look like there's also the term cutting of a cord, like there's something that's not even ours that we've been holding on to or living from that needs to actually be like parted with.
Mhm.
And then sometimes I think of being in like shallower waters and having the choice and like whether it's you're finally ready or the universe is like calling you out. It's not that like where you were prior was bad or wrong. It's just that now your system is ready for a new depth and can take it, or the guidance is there, the things are right. And so it's not like you're still in the ocean. You're not cutting the cord. You're not like letting something new be born. You're not necessarily, oh, also like death and rebirth, I like as an analogy. Like sometimes you actually have to die. We go through seasons, we see the winter trees shed leaves, or the fall trees shed leaves and the snow come. And then with the ocean analogy, it's like it's not like you fully need to die or something fully needs to be reborn for you to be like, this ocean is bigger than these waves, and I'm not staying here anymore. So not forcing you to choose like A, B, C, D, but what you're describing is so challenging. And also as I'm a odd mix with like type A and then like radical creativity, like give me no rules. And it's like this chaos in my life of like all the rules, no rules, all the rules, no rules. But from the side of me that's like perfectionist, all the rules, releasing that control is so challenging. Also, you're talking about marriage, a legal binding, children. Like there's so many things that could make it like that would make it easy to just talk back to that voice and be like, no, it's a voice, I'm not following it. So when you just talk about that knowing, um, I am just curious what that shift felt like in your life. Did it feel like it like it was led to you? Did it feel like a death or a rebirth? What did it feel like?
So the initial, so basically I'll explain it this way. So initially it felt like a clearing. It just
Mm.
was like, you need to clear space. So it was almost like if you're walking on uh, a hiking trail and there's all these leaves and you just clear them aside, or there's brush and you do the brush clearance and you make the path. So first it was a clearing, and then there was a death and a rebirth.
Mm.
So an action, and it felt like that. So as I was going through that, it was really a very intense part of my spiritual awakening. And again, it was this like the spiritual awakening that I went through was not something that I sought out or that I studied or understood. So as it was happening, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going on?
Yeah.
And so I remember this feeling of I'm being reborn right now and I'm raising my children at the same time and we're growing up together. And actually it was really beautiful, but I also wanted to be mindful of how it could feel for them, especially with all the change, now being in two homes and dad and mom are divorced, and it's a whole new world for them too. So I would just kind of hold myself in that space of like, I'm just being reborn and this is overwhelming. And I'm also their mother, right? And so just sitting with them at times, which really helped deepen the intimacy of our relationship and owning what was happening. Like, hey, I'm learning a new way.
Mm.
And sometimes I may not do the right thing or say the right thing. And I want you to know it has nothing to do with you. I love you so deeply. I'm learning with you. Right. And I know that can feel really confusing because
Mm.
I really could feel that like that I had guilt around that. There was a lot of guilt in the beginning around the family separating and not being ever feeling like I'd be enough for them because I can't be with them all the time and all these things. But there was a real rebirth of me too. And so there was almost like a childlike discovery, like learning the world that was coming up, and and really meeting myself. And so I wanted to hold space for them to know like that I love them and I have space for them. And I also know that it might feel confusing for them, if that makes sense.
There's so much compassion in there too. And the holding that you're all going through it and then you're going through your own as well.
Yeah.
And you mentioned intimacy right now. And that was like a key thing when we opened this and you described your story, this intimacy free life, I don't want to say free, this intimacy-less life initially to a life now with intimacy. So let's start to look at that opening to intimacy and the journey into it and what has come forth. Also, how you define it and what it looks like. Yeah.
So very interesting. The lack of intimacy that I experienced in my life was from a fear of knowing myself. So I truly believe that in order to have intimacy, you first need to be intimate with yourself.
Mm.
Right. And so I had entered into this relationship with my ex-husband. I had shown him a woman who didn't know how to love herself and didn't know how to be intimate. And so that's exactly what I received, was a loveless and basically a relationship without any intimacy.
Mm.
But when I came out of my marriage, I was so angry that we hadn't had sex. Like I was like, I just want, at that point, I was like, I just want to have sex. I just want to have sex with somebody. I was really angry, but I was putting all of this projection on to him to be the one to fill me
Mm.
with desire, to fill me with some sexual intimacy, right? But we lacked any sort of emotional intimacy, and we definitely weren't going to have any physical intimacy in that. And so I came out and I read Mama Gina's book, Pussy,
Mm. Yes.
Reformation.
Yes.
And when I read it, I remember a light bulb going off in my head, and I was like, oh my gosh, I looked at him to fill me with
Mm.
intimacy, to see me as being desired. But what
Mm.
about me? I couldn't look at myself. I couldn't touch myself. I couldn't love myself. Right. And so I had never, I was 37, 30, just turned 38 when my ex-husband and I parted ways. And I had never touched myself my
Mm.
entire life. I had never engaged in any sort of self-pleasure,
Like even as a teenager? And
even
what
as a teenager. Never, ever.
was it like to have, what were you told about sex or about that?
This is the interesting thing, is that in all the deep work I have done, I still cannot figure out why I wouldn't touch myself.
Mm.
That's something that I'm waiting to be revealed at some point, if it's meant to be. I always feel that spirit reveals to us the lessons and the teachings when we're ready for it. So there's never like a force or a need behind it, but I don't quite understand it, to be honest. But what I know is that I couldn't touch myself. And if I did, it felt completely numb. I couldn't feel a thing.
Did you wear tampons? Do you mind me asking?
I wore tampons from the first day I got my period, actually. Yeah. So it
That's
wasn't about like,
It's another interesting layer for women. Like for me, I did touch myself, but I didn't wear tampons because I couldn't go internal to myself. And I really hated that feeling. And some of the women I've worked with vaginismus as well, it's like any type of touch in that area is painful. So,
yeah, yeah. It's so interesting. Yeah. I was, when I first got my period, we went on a trip to Florida and we were swimming. So I just started wearing tampons right away. And part of that, I think, is like that numbness. I didn't feel it, it wasn't like I didn't feel anything. And it was just like, okay, whatever. But
mm,
anyway, so I came out of this relationship and I'm sitting in my bathtub reading, I was listening to it on tape, Mama Gina's book.
great
And
audio too, for anyone who hasn't listened or read.
so good. So I remember having this light bulb go off where it was like, that's when I decided I'm going to have the best love story with myself and I'm going to have the best sex of my life with myself. So I went
Mm.
on this journey of deep intimacy with myself. And I decided that I wasn't going to allow anybody to give me a better orgasm than I could give myself. Like I wanted to be the one that could do all of that. So then when my partner came along, and this was an idea that I got from Mama Gina's book. And I can't remember if she used this analogy or if I came up with it based off of hers, but it was this idea of being the ice cream sundae, right? Like
Mm.
I've got it all. I've got the ice cream, I've got the sprinkles, I've got the banana, I've got the syrup. I've got it all. I am delicious and I am good and I am perfect, right? Like perfect for me just the way that I am.
Mm.
And whoever comes along, whether it be in sex, in a relationship, like partnership, is just this cherry on top, right?
Mhm.
And so that was the journey that I went on, was developing not just an emotional intimacy with myself, but also a physical intimacy with myself so that I would never outsource either of those things again.
Mhm.
Because I was so empty in my prior relationship, but not because anybody had done anything wrong, but because I was outsourcing, I was looking outside of me for all, again, the validation that I'm desirable, that I'm sexy, that I'm lovable, that I'm right. I had none of that coming from within. So there was a deep pit within me that nobody could fill except
Mhm.
myself.
Mhm.
And that's when I started my self-pleasure journey.
Mm. Okay, so I'm curious about beginning that journey as a woman close to 40. Thank you for naming age, not obligated here, but welcome on this stage. We're working with every damn person who wants to explore their own body or explore the body of a feminine being. And there's literally no age limit on that. I wanted to ask about one other quality. So, but maybe I'm diverting it. So let me know if this is going in a different direction. When you're talking about the control too, because when we're looking at control too, the portal of one's being is another great place to actually not go. It's much easier to you were talking about inviting people to your home, right? This, like the same way we can just fill the role of woman. There's so many ways to satisfy, right? Fill the role of successful person, successful human, successful woman, good girl, like obey the rules, and going deeper into more aliveness, death, and sex are like all portals to the unknown.
Mhm.
So much easier to control the body than to love the body. Much easier to control a person than to love a person.
Yeah.
And we were talking before this a little bit about betrayal. And as people who love control and are fear of surrender and have a fear of surrendering, also that desire to really never be betrayed, never experience, basically try to stop the side of life that does involve death, loss, grief, pain. Not to say we have to go through betrayal as people or we have to go through something deeply traumatic, but we can't avoid that there is going to be loss.
Yeah.
It can be a huge challenge to the explorer, and so easier not to explore. And I also just want to name this as someone who's chosen within the program we studied in to study life transitions. One thing they speak about in that study is, since we're people who are all working with seasons and cycles, is that people can be like we know fall and winter always follow summer, right? So as people we can be scared to go into summer just by the intuitive knowing, like something in us knows, well, after summer, winter comes, like after achievement, loss comes. So I'm going to not even achieve. I'm going to not even try. I'm going to not even go for greater depth, aliveness, joy, because I'm so afraid that it won't be.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, you have opened that portal of going into greater depth. But I
Yeah.
really appreciate your honesty of like decades before opening this door.
Yeah.
So what was it like pulling open this door and choosing this, turning yourself into ice cream sundae, and not only opening the door to yourself, but you did open yourself to partnership and you have engaged now in a new kind of partnership.
Yeah. So the first feeling I remember when I came out, in addition to having like the best love story and developing this deep intimacy with myself, was, can I trust myself? Because I had betrayed myself so much in my marriage, just by being in rejection of myself. So then I was afraid to even trust myself. And so there was a real fear around partnership. And that's why I mentioned that. So what was it like? I mean, first, pleasure is so fun. So I really like, it's interesting. When I was first starting off, I didn't really know what to expect. So I'm going to rewind a bit actually, because when I first came out of my marriage, 5 days later, I jumped into bed with my tennis pro. and I haven't talked about this publicly yet. People know, like in my life, but I haven't like talked about it on my platform or, you know, on any podcasts. But I jumped into bed with my tennis pro, who was like a model, 8-pack, like it was the total cliche. But what I did was I was trying to fill that void again, and it was again a complete lack of any sort of emotional intimacy, but there was a lot of sex. But I was bypassing any sort of intimacy. So it was when I came out of that, I was in that for like 5 or 6 months, and then I realized that I was just doing repeating patterns and in complete avoidance of getting to know myself. And that when I came out of that, I decided that I was going to go deep with myself. So as I first started in the self-pleasure space, it was about pouring love into myself. And so my journey involved plant medicine and self-pleasure and nature. I think were like the greatest pieces of medicine for me. And then doing like inner child, like really doing deep inner child and self-love work. So trying to think of the best way to explain this. So I came out of this tennis pro whirlwind where I was like feeling like I was on a high, but it was just again in denial. Came
Also,
out.
like when you're dating someone, you can brag about it, you can talk about it, people
Yes,
can relate. All of a sudden, you go on a personal journey, and they're like, "What?"
exactly. The journey is very like inward. So I came out about a month after that relationship. I sat with in a psychedelic assisted therapy journey. It was MDMA and psilocybin. And I can't actually tell you what happened in that journey, except for that I vibrated and I moaned the whole time. And I think there was a deep reconstruction of my nervous system. And I came out of that. And literally that was the whole journey. It was me vibrating and moaning. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. And then I had a vision at the very end as the medicine was coming off of me wearing a tennis outfit, running in front in this like cookie cutter neighborhood that I lived in. And there are all these women that, you know, I had pretty much superficial relationships with calling me, and I was running away from them. Only there was a force like kind of pulling me back, and I was trying really hard to escape. That was the vision. And then I came out of that, and again, in my bathtub, baths were also part of this journey. I had this deep knowing that came through that said, I just need time with myself. And what I realized was that I had never spent time by myself. I filled all my time with kids, with work, with friends, with anything to be in complete avoidance of myself. And then I started to go on these long hikes, engage in deep self-pleasure sessions, and really just start to get to know myself. Because at the time when I entered this space, if you had asked me what I was passionate about, what I liked, who I was, I would look at you with a complete blank face and not be able to answer you. And I wanted to shift that because I knew that was the only way out of the emptiness. And so I think one of the really beautiful things about my self-pleasure and dropping into that was that, one, I was ready for it. So I made a commitment that I'm going to do this. But what's really interesting is that even when I used my hands at that point, I still couldn't feel anything. So I had to use like yoni wands and vibrators. It was like I couldn't just use my hands in it. And for me, the relation, like the understanding that came through was that, again, it's a rejection of self. So I'm not worthy of bringing that kind of deep pleasure to myself. So sitting with that and working with that in pleasure, working with worthiness and self-love and pouring in that was really vital in overcoming that. And then the next thing was that I did this, again, a psychedelic assisted therapy journey right before I went to Layla's retreat. And at that journey, the medicine came through and said, you know, spirit came through and said, you need to touch your pussy now. And I was like, huh? Oh, okay. So I did. And as I did, it was the first time in my life where I felt my pussy. And I was like, my gosh, my pussy is divine. It's divine. And I was looking at my partner at the time, and I said to him, my pussy is divine. And he goes, yeah, I know. And I was like, no, 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 no. You know, I was like, it is divine. It is glorious. Nothing has ever felt so good. And he's like, no, I know. He's like, you're telling me something I already know. And I was like, no, you don't like, it was like a whole new world was open for me, which was beautiful. And it took a lot of that, intentional self-pleasure, pouring that love in. And it was once I got to this space of being able to love myself, right, that I was able to really let a partner in. What I think is really interesting is that I've had this deep understanding that the people I attract into my life is a reflection of my own internal like state of being, right? So I remember when I'm going to rewind a bit. So when my partner and I started, it was purely physical. And we were just really, we were like magnetized to one another, but only for the purpose. Yeah, my current partner, but only for the purposes of being physical. So, we started having sex, and I remember just like crying the first time we had sex and thanking him. And I told you in a conversation off camera that like I saw all my chakras light up and this like energy channel opened in me, and it was magic. And I credit a lot of the work that I had done on my own because I was having amazing sex with myself, before I entered into this. And then I think there was also a really beautiful, bringing together through forces much larger than us, that allowed us to come here. But I was deep in my healing journey when I met him. And there was a lot of back and forth between us, a lot of factors that were kind of keeping us apart from one another. And it was purely physical, just once a week, once a week, once a week. But at a certain point, I realized that I was in love with this man. It actually, everything comes to me in plant medicine. I did a psychedelic assisted therapy journey. I saw my past, my present, my future. This was 4 months after no, yeah, 3 months after we had met. We had slept together twice at this point. And when I saw my future, I saw that I was married to him. And I was like, this is weird. I'm not really ready to be married. I'm having fun being single and whatever. So I sent him a message telling him everything I'd seen. And I said, if you choose to accept this, our life is amazing. It's like so beautiful, but you have to accept you're worthy of it. And I do too. And once we
You
accept that
shared
we're
the
worthy,
text message?
it's in a voice memo, 30-minute voice memo.
People say I write intense messages.
Yes, it was super intense. And I was like, if we choose to accept that we're worthy of this, like our life is incredible. And if we don't, that's okay. We just won't choose this path. But in the meantime, I was like, so I told him we should stop having sex because again, it was like a complicated, messy situation. We were both in other relationships and it was just not like my partner, I had opened up to him before I was with my current partner. And I told him that I wanted to have sex with another man. And I thought it was just going to be sex. But then when I went into it, I was like, this is going to get really messy. And I didn't want to be in my current partner at the time, not the man that I'm married to now, was very upset. And I was just like, I just don't want to deal with mess. So I had told Seamus, that's who I'm married to now, like, let's not do this. And then I had this vision that we were married. So now I told him, let's not do this. And now 3 weeks after we had slept together for the second time, I'm sending him and we hadn't spoken at all. I'm sending him a message telling him that if we choose to believe that we're worthy of this love, we're going to have an incredible life together and we're together forever. And there's no rush. But in the meantime, I was like, I'm realizing that I said no to like the most amazing sex of my life. So let's keep doing that part. So we kept like meeting up once a week, but we weren't talking in between. We weren't really together. And then I realized like I was madly in love with him and it was becoming more painful to be in this kind of relationship where we weren't really together and we weren't speaking and there was no aftercare after sex. Like we'd have these incredible sex dates and then just go our separate way. And I felt very like alone. And I had this vision of me in the bathtub. And in this vision, I was in the bath again. Always in the bath. And I had this vision of myself as a little girl with my hands up in the air. So, sorry, let me rewind really quickly. We had just slept together and he looked at me and said, I'm going to take some space and go take care of some things on my end. And I thought that he meant that he was done with me. So he left my house and I started crying. And my first instinct was, let me hold back these tears. And then I decided, you know what, I'll just let the tears come. And I cried and I cried and I cried. And then I went into the tub. And in the tub, I had a vision of myself as a little girl, reaching my hands up and screaming. And I was looking to everybody else to hold her, everyone except me. And she was like, I only want you. And I was like, I can't, I'm sorry, I can't hold you. You're not worthy enough. Was like the exact like thing that came through. And I was like, well, that's painful, but it's just where I'm at. And I went out to the mountains to go on a hike. I was about to go work an urgent care shift. So I'm completely sober, wearing my scrubs in the mountains. And I see like I turn this corner and suddenly I like see my little girl come and hold my hand. And I told her I love her. And we had a nice conversation about how much we love each other and how I'm there for her and how I'll hold her. And I walked out and I was like, I'm going to be great. Like, I'm so good. And now I'm going to take some time just to be single and to be like intentionally celibate and be on my own. And that was my plan. And the next day, Seamus, my current husband, came to me and told me that he was madly in love with me and that he wants to be with me. And 3 weeks later, we were married. And I remember at the time thinking, I'm still on my healing journey. And if we're truly bringing in people who are a reflection of our own internal like state, what if I evolve past this and I get to a point where I move beyond this relationship? And can I do this? Can I enter into this relationship now? Or do I need to wait? Right? It's very like heady. Anyways, I was like, forget it. I'm just going to follow what I'm being guided to do. And like, this is a relationship I'm meant to be on. And what I've discovered is that because he's also open and on this journey and doing such deep work, we're actually healing and growing and expanding into greater depths alongside one another. And there's been a lot of beauty in that, a lot of awareness, and deep healing beyond what I could do on my own. There's like this even deeper layer of healing that's happening in relationship, and I continue to do my work on my own. So yeah.
Beautiful. Did you meet him then during this period of getting to know yourself more intimately, or after?
Yeah, so I met him right when I started my journey. It was about a month after I read Mama Gina's book,
Mhm.
and we were together 3 months after that for the first time. He and I met at a program called the Hoffman process. Do you know about it?
No, but that's my last name, so I'm interested.
It's amazing. It's a deep dive into your patterns, a lot
Mm,
of inner child work, a lot of visualizations. It's really, really beautiful, deep healing work. And that's where we met, was in that space, which is, we were a couple months after that was when we got together for the first time.
yeah,
Yeah, I guess about 3 months after that. So
beautiful. So I feel like there's probably so many different areas still that we could go in. But given that this space is meant to be tasters, I want people to be able to get in touch with you. I want Seeds of Elegance to be kind of two things. One, a portal so that people who are doing invisible work in the world can uh, welcome people toward that who haven't been seen this as a path. And then also that I call it seeds of elegance because these are seeds where we are opening also as a world, just like in our individual life, there is new paths that are possible. There are collective things we are opening to, and it does require a seed for a tree to grow there. And so I want to ask about, given the time that we have about 10 more minutes, what feels the most, just when you think about like how your work is opening up in the world?
yeah.
Because thank you so much for sharing from your journey. And we know that as people who are working on relationship, on embodiment, on healing, our journey is the foundation for the work we're doing. And at the same time, there is no such thing as, in my opinion, a relationship expert. Like all of us are in the movement of the thing. And that's one of the most challenging and beautiful things of being in the space of healing therapy, coaching, relationship work is you are moving through your own problems and your own challenges in your own life. And you are choosing this commitment to support and serve and create and hold
Yeah.
space for and open a portal for and forge a path for
Mhm.
something that involves others and allow yourself to be used as you continue to be whittled upon and refined by this great universe and also craft, co-create with source. So,
Mhm.
what is it that you've like witnessed in this personal path unfolding and in you already like opening up your professional world to working on women's health and also you've worked with not just women as well, correct?
Yeah, men too. So what is the question is, what is the path that I'm opening up? Is that?
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
like it's one step deeper than just what's the profession, right? Like what's the profession is one thing. Someone can call and you can name that too.
There's,
Someone can call you for XYZ, but also like given that we've just gotten a taste of your journey and there's so much depth and there's so much listening, so much
Mhm.
intuition, and so much now living in this journey with a partner. Um, what is it that you feel you are, yeah, kind of uniquely creating or opening people up to in the work?
Yeah, beautiful. So there's a deep level of awareness in my life that leads to freedom, like a true freedom and ease. And that's something that I've discovered both through all my training and my own personal journey, and something that I love to help guide my clients and even my patients too, like in the clinical setting, right? Which is, can there be an acceptance of exactly as you are, knowing that you are whole, you are perfect, you are safe, you are loved, just the way you are, right? And then how can you access those parts of you, your truth, and kind of scrape away all the outside noise, all the boxes that you've been put into, and go into what is your truth and fully embrace that and accept that with such certainty that you then have that freedom and ease to move through life with. And then that's like on a more individual level, but within relationship is, how can there be a base of awareness, of compassion, that can lead to a truly divine union in which you two are living alongside one another while also being in deep connection, right? So I kind of view it like these roots that cross, where you're completely autonomous and completely whole and safe and steady on your own, right? You have this deep trust, this deep love of self that allows you to be in this truly beautiful union in which there is safety and love and acceptance and awareness, in which you love from this place of seeing the divine within you and in your partner. And then taking it one step further is bringing in the pleasure and the play. So intentional self-pleasure practices and partnered pleasure that allows you to go on what I call the sexual journey, which is being able to drop into your body, get out of your mind, and experience your deepest pleasure. And in those moments of your deepest pleasure, meet these parts of you that have been boxed up, caged up, told they weren't okay to be present. And as those parts reveal themselves deep in pleasure, then how can you take those parts and accept them and love them and bring them out into your everyday life and integrate them, knowing that it's totally safe, and not just safe, but celebrated, to
Mm,
accept those parts and to show those parts to the
mm,
world and to yourself.
mm. Thank you. And okay, we do have, I know I was mentioning I need to hop on something after this, but I let them know I'll be a little late. So while we're here together, I want to just for a moment between the two of us, because we did get to have a little time before this. No matter what, entering a journey of greater like what Dr. Ricky's also opening for, if you're new on this journey, is like the opening into the shadow world a little bit of who we are too, opening to parts work. There's so many different avenues if you're someone who wants to go deeper with yourself that you can. And I also want to bring it back around as we close to magic, because magic was also a word you mentioned at the beginning. And that's another beautiful thing to get to hold in tandem, magic and science. And that one is not the cancellation of the other. And when we're talking about love of pussy and of touching oneself, this is not just like, I can imagine for me, an older version of myself that was like laugh even, yeah, relatively recently, that would like laugh or like curl in or just like couldn't hold that. And now when I can hear you speak, I'm just like, there's no shudder, because it's like you're talking about pure power. You're talking about the human creation that is that we all contain, that is systematically women have been shut off from exploring. So I just want to name this beautiful, while we're both here, this beautiful spectrum of both coming into love through the love of one's body and own being, and coming into magic there, as well as coming into love through being broken, like deeply broken open.
Mm.
And I name that because like I on my space here yet, I haven't spoken about this, but obviously like for most people who know me, the death of my brother is the thing that really like accelerated, opened up some of my journey. But I was always on a spiritual journey pre that. I was always on a holistic health journey before that. One of the deepest things that journey opened for me, among other things, was loss of trust in the masculine. Prior to that, I didn't have, it was like, I can play, I'm having fun, I'm having like I had so much fun. I had internal challenges, but I had a very like big opening sex life.
Mm.
And after that, I felt like that got um
Mm.
there was like a tightness all around it, because for me the worst thing happened. Like my love as a woman wasn't enough. That's what it felt like. My love as a woman, because I loved him and was so close to him, that was the story I was putting, wasn't enough to keep him here. And so there was, for me at that time, this feeling of betrayal actually, and loss. And I, because we got a little bit of space to talk about betrayal before, I just want to name that. And if you want to go into your own experience with that, you can, but I want to name that I went through so many different types of healing, like searches for healing and like cognitive and even embodied, but like non-sexual roots before finding that. And it might sound strange, like I'm talking about my brother. It's not that there is sexuality or romance in that relationship, but it's that until I could connect with my body and my own pleasure and my own power, I actually couldn't even hold the depth of the anger, the betrayal, the other flavors of despair that are also actually beautiful because they're all shades of love. I couldn't hold all that without the magic and pleasure of the body.
Mm.
And I just feel the need to name that as people who might be listening and be like, but what does touching your pussy have to do with it? And just really, really like allow, yeah, if there's anything you want to name to that, to because you have this spiritual and sexual guidance for someone
Yeah.
who's like, but I already, but I have medicine, you know, like I have plant medicine, or I have a therapist, or I have this, like, why sexuality work and self-love work is so actually important to the inevitable loss and other types of pain we're going to experience, but allowing play and magic to get to be guiding forces through the depths, not an override, not a bypass of the depths, but like the
Yeah.
greatest holding, the greatest foundation for the depths to also get to move through us.
Yes. All right. Well, First of all, thank you so much for sharing that. It was so potent and so beautiful, and such a beautiful transmission in what you just shared. So I just want to name that, celebrate it, honor it. So depending on how much time we have, I'd love to answer that question and then expand a little more, which is that what pleasure does is it literally, when you go into this loving of your body, first of all, you're accepting yourself and you're going into deep self-love. But then going into pleasure, right? When you go into full surrender, is possibly the scariest thing you can do. We talked a lot about control. It's a complete loss of control. It's a complete surrender to the unknown, to the orgasmic waves of your body, to your body reaching new realms and, going to new places. And so when that happens, it actually allows the capacity for the depths of the shadows, right? For the depths of the rage, of the anger, of everything to be felt, to be expressed, to be known. If you can hold yourself as you're in deep surrender to pleasure, right? Then you can hold yourself through anything. And I think that's the deeper you go into it and you start utilizing breath with pleasure and really having these intentional self-pleasure sessions, you can go into the underworld and meet all your shadows. And you can also see your brightest light, so it's really, and then you can bring that into your life. So that's the integration, right? It's like, how do I move through life now? Right? With all these parts of me. And that's, I think, really where it's at when it comes to pleasure and how it can be so beautiful for allowing yourself to reach those depths without bypassing. Because there is bypassing, which is I'm going to have sex without intimacy, or I'm going to have orgasm without self intimacy, right? So you can definitely bypass, and I use sex to bypass plenty of times. But when you can get to these depths, which is what I guide, clients through, and I'm sure some of the work that you're doing as well, it allows you to reach those depths and to no longer bypass, but to even be able to experience like your greatest pain and your greatest pleasure all at once, which I think is just magic. That is magic.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on betrayal and my betrayal wound as well, if we have a little more time.
Okay.
So I mentioned to you before the call that I always had this fear of being cheated on, from a young age. So I grew up, my father had been abandoned by his father at the age of 10, who left and started a new family. His father had lost his parents suddenly in the Holocaust. He left to go to Palestine thinking he'd see them again, never saw them again, and everything was taken from him. So there's a big history of betrayal in my lineage. And whether it's something I carried in my DNA or was constantly hearing the fear of my father around betrayal and cheating because of his own father wound that he had, I carried this in me. And so I had a deep fear always, my entire life, of being cheated on, even though I had never, ever been cheated on. So when I came into this relationship with my current partner, I continued to carry that fear. And I remember we'd go to parties and I'd be looking around for him the whole time because I was so afraid that he would be cheating on me. I was constantly in fear that there was cheating, constantly, even though there was no reason for me to have that fear. So, I mean, like I said, we kind of entered in a messy way, but still we had always been honest with one another, but this lived within me. So I truly believe the divine sent something my way to heal this pattern and to be able to put a stop to this in my lineage, the fear of cheating, and to come into a deep trust of self and love of self and safety of self. And so I carried this anxiousness with me. And then I actually went to Layla's retreat in June and claimed that I'm going to release it. I did. I claimed, you know what? And my story that I was saying was, my life is so beautiful. I moved to my dream home. I was married to my dream man. Everything finally felt like through all the shit I'd been through in my life, finally it was good, right? But I was in deep rejection of it. I felt that I was not worthy of having this life.
Mm.
And so when I came to Layla's retreat, I said, you know what? I'm going to accept that I'm worthy of this. And I decided to relax a little bit. And I came back and I went to a cacao ceremony. So I'm surrounded by like all these empowered women and deep in our pleasure, doing such beautiful work. And I come back, I go to this cacao ceremony 2 nights after returning from retreat with 6 women. And there's a tarot deck laid out, and we're told to draw a card. And, I was really, really energetically open. I put my hand around the tarot deck, and like a vacuum or a magnet, my hand was drawn to this one card. So I was like, okay, it's not a mistake. I look at it. It says, look a little closer. You may be being deceived. And I thought, oh. And one of the women in the circle said, everybody read their cards. And I actually refused to read my card. I threw it down. And
Mm.
2 nights after that, I decided to look in Seamus's phone, and I saw a text exchange between him and this woman that he used to be physically active with. They never had like a relationship outside of being physical. And in it, he had shared videos, like very intimate videos and pictures of me and, us having sex together and all these things that I had not consented to. And I felt incredibly violated. And on top of that, they had engaged in self-pleasure via text message. And I felt really, really shocked, really violated. And Seamus and I, because we had not known each other very long, we had gotten, married very quickly after having this vision. And, I kind of was like, holy shit, was I just, completely misguided? And do I even know this person? And my first instinct was, I need to get out. I was so scared. Well, 2 weeks later, we had already planned to go sit in 4 ayahuasca ceremonies. So Seamus came to me and said, hey, this had nothing to do with you. I have a lot of my own trauma, my own pain, and I deeply love you, and I'm deeply committed to this. Give me a chance. And I thought to myself, this is like the most painful thing ever, but I'm going to give him a chance. And because it's just too weird to me that we're set up to go sit with Aya, and it feels like there's something bigger here, bigger than me and bigger than him. So we did, we went and we sat with Aya, and ultimately we healed. We did some deep work around, he did his own work, I did my own work, and we did work together. And our union is much stronger. It's much more real. That insecurity that I had around cheating has been completely healed, which is so beautiful. But in the very last ayahuasca ceremony, which I think was one of the most beautiful messages that I really want to share here, is that I did healing for all the men in this space, is how it started. So I started and I went around the room for all the men that were in the room, and I did healing work for all of them in their journeys. And then I did healing work for my father. I saw my father in like fully dressed in like a button-down shirt and jeans, standing in front of his business in his full masculine, afraid to feel. I told him it's okay to feel. And then by the end of this scene, he had turned into wearing an opera gown. He had breasts, was wearing a wig, and was deep, like how opera singers are like so emotional. He was like so emotive, so emotional, and it was really beautiful. And then after that, I started to have a series of orgasms, and I didn't understand it. And I thought, I need to stop this. And then Spirit was like, you don't get to decide. So I continued having the orgasms, and I was like, I don't understand what's happening. And it feels like I'm doing something wrong because I'm in a space with people, but whatever, I'm going to let it be. And then suddenly Spirit came to me and said, okay, it's time for you to give birth. And I was like, what? Spirit goes, it's time for you to birth the divine masculine. You see, you have always viewed the masculine as toxic, and it showed me all the ways in which I viewed the masculine as toxic. And Spirit told me, you're actually embodying the toxic feminine by only making space for men to be toxic. I was like, oh, okay. So Spirit said, embody the divine feminine and make space for men to be divine, and that you'll birth the divine masculine. And I pushed and I pushed and I cried and I cried. And it was the hardest childbirth I've ever had in my life. And I thought I was going to die because I didn't think that I could believe that men could have any gentleness to them. I didn't believe men could be divine. Right. And I thought that was it. I'm going to die and men will die and that's it. The world's over. But I was able to birth the divine masculine. And it was so beautiful. And when I did, the male shaman, there's a male and female shaman duo. The male shaman showed up right in front of me, right as I birthed the divine masculine. And I looked at him and I said, thank you so much for being here. I said, I couldn't look at you this whole week. It was a 10-day retreat, 4 ceremonies. This is the 4th ceremony. I said, I couldn't look at you all week because every time I looked at you, all I could see was somebody who was so toxic. I couldn't believe that you could be good, that you could be gentle, even though I know it. I had known him for a year. I'd known him for a year. He was the first man to show me that men could be gentle, right? And I said, and now you're here. And I just birthed the divine masculine. And now you've arrived. And I know that I was only making space for men to be toxic. And in that I was being toxic, right? And now I could see that in me healing, in me embracing my gentleness and my divinity, I can allow and hold space for men to be divine. Because that's the only way that they can show up as being divine and gentle and whole. If I continue to project them as being toxic, that's the only space that I'm holding for them. And he said, let me sing to that. And he did. And in this, I saw this beautiful dance of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and almost like, coiling into one, seeing this just such beauty and divinity in each of us. But it was a real eye-opener to see that it was so much of my own doing, so much of my own wounding and my own pain that was creating pain for the men in my life, that was only creating a space that allowed for them to show up in toxic behaviors. And that when I could hold the space for them to be gentle, a space where they're safe to truly be gentle, to tap into their emotions, to their wholeness, then they can show up in all their divinity. So.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. And I've said it before here, but men, you are so loved here. You're so loved. And yeah, it's hard not for me not to get emotional in that because I truly feel so driven by a feminism that is so deeply, deeply allowing for men as important as it is for women to be given this and encouraged in this permission to explore the depth of our power. Is there the need for men to have the permission to explore the depth of their sovereign gentleness, emotionality, peace, love, and things that we actually further disconnect them from by furthering a narrative that they are as much not that is actually, I think, a parallel vibration with a woman is not powerful. We're just keeping the wholeness for both of us from each contain it all. And that also emotionality is an expression of power.
Yeah. So I just love that. And the message is so potent too, because I'm raising a son in this world. And I feel so blessed to understand the depths of that, holding space for him to be in his emotions and his wholeness.
Yes.
Gentleness. So.
Well, there's so many more avenues to go in, but I always feel like the beginning is the end here. The end is the beginning. It's just a doorway. We just got to the house, and now anyone who wants to come on in, explore. How can people get in touch with you? And I do want to ask, so do you take male and female clients? Do you take couples? Do you prefer working with one or the other?
Yeah, I work with couples and individuals.
Okay.
And individuals can either be in relationship coming to me on their own or single. And I see both men and women. I actually love seeing both. So, and I love seeing couples as well.
Beautiful.
And then people can reach me on Instagram. They can follow if they want, Gush with Rikki. It's GUSHWITHRIKKI. Or they can email me, Rikki@gushwithrikki.com, or check out my website, gushwithrikki.com. And I made it, the brand is Gush because I love nothing more than squirting.
I was like, it's getting juicy now. You know, I always go depth first, but
Oh, it's so
fluid.
yum. Mhm. Yes, it's my favorite.
Mm. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you, Dr. Rikki, for being here.
Thank
And
you for having me.
cheers to many more years of this work continuing to open and the path unfolding.
Yes, and thank you for the beautiful work that you're doing. Such an honor.